So, as you know, there was a bit of an altercation in my last video. Not naming any names, and I do apologize. However, this week I took the measures to call in a few police stories. Yeah, take that, Scully. Well, hello, my spooky friends. We had a bit of an issue, as you saw in the last video. And so I decided that maybe the happy couple should spend a little time apart from me. Scully is here with me today. Say hello, Scully. Oh, you're going to just not talk. Okay, fine, whatever. You know what you did. But as I promised you, I am going to tell you some police stories, and this comes from WF. Now, understand he is retired law enforcement, but he emailed me some great stories, and I said, I have got to do a whole video about this. So let's jump right in. Round 2, and I'll try to get all stories into this email. 911 received a call from a homeowner having chronic problems with something in or around their house. 2 officers were dispatched, and by chance, both were pretty new, with under 3 years' experience. On arrival, they went into the house and sat in the family room, which had an open door into the kitchen. Along with the dad and mom was their 14-year-old daughter, who sat on the floor. As the parents were talking about their issues, suddenly the girl's backpack flew across the room, hitting the girl in the back. Oh my gosh. Seems the entity wanted to alert the officers this was nobody's imagination. Some minutes later, a boot flew across the room, hitting the girl in the head with a solid whack. Oh my God. Y'all know how I feel about these ghosts throwing stuff. In the midst of flying stuff hitting the daughter, the officers could see glass dinnerware sliding off the kitchen counter and crashing onto the floor. It was soon decided everyone should leave the house, at least for that night. Absolutely. The officers escorted the family to the door into the garage with one officer in front. As soon as the officer opened the door, the garage door opened by itself. It was like, well, we'll assist you out of this house. The officers made a real police case report, which was a superb example of report writing. There was nothing to investigate, but they felt they needed to document the events, probably in case something happened later. Oh, wow. I can't imagine what I would do if I was taking a report and, stuff started flying across the room. I mean, I would probably yell at the ghost, but y'all know that's just me. It sounds honestly like a poltergeist. And I know for a long time we all thought poltergeists were just the kind that threw stuff. But now, if you're up to date on the ghost world, people are saying that a poltergeist is not actually another entity, but it is caused by someone in the house, maybe with trauma or something going on. So it looks like ghostly activity, but it's kind of like telekinesis. That is the theory that I hear the most now. So you have to wonder, was someone in that house going through trauma? Was the girl traumatized by something? Not something that they generally teach you, okay, in these kind of professions. But if you know, you know. So maybe there was something going on that someone should have looked into. I don't know. Definitely a spooky story. Oh, but there's a little bit more. The odd thing is the family lived in the house for 17 years with no problems. I felt then and still feel the daughter was the key to explaining the sudden eruption of paranormal spiritual activity. This occurred circa 2008. Oh, okay. When the above story spread around the police department, it was like a dam broke and other never-heard stories came out, mostly from my CSI staff. Okay, yeah, for some reason I thought that story was over. Yeah, I think there was something going on with that daughter. So, I wonder if anything ever came out. It would be interesting to follow up and see what may have happened later or talk to her. Just a thought. Next, a deputy was at a residence taking a report. He was seated in the front room with a couple and he faced the stairway going to the basement. While writing, he saw about 5 teenagers, male and female, come up from the basement and leave out the front door. He didn't think anything of it. As he was wrapping up, he asked if they suspected any of their teenagers' friends of doing the theft. The couple replied, "We don't have any teenagers. Our kids left the house 20 years ago." Oh. So the discussion went to the group that left the house from the basement, which kind of alarmed the couple. It was a brand new house, never lived in. Never lived in before. Now that's a head scratcher. Yes, it certainly is. I mean, can you imagine sitting there? You don't think anything of a group of teenagers coming up from the basement and walking out the door. But what's crazy is the people living there didn't see it, only the officer. That is bizarre. And if it was a brand new house, then there obviously wasn't a tragedy that we know of there. So who were these teenagers and what was, my question is, was there before this house? Was it another house with a tragic end, or a like what kind of building was it? I don't know. That is weird though. Just that would freak me out. Just seeing a bunch of people walk by, you don't think anything of it. Obviously, they looked real. If you remember, I told a story months ago about a real person walking through an assisted living. It was me and my coworker standing there, and I hesitated. We were talking, and I let him pass, and I went into detail about that. It was a very real person who actually wasn't there. She never saw him, but I did, and I mean, he was solid. That's all I can say. Nothing ghostly about him until I realized he wasn't there, after I watched him slowly walk past me. Creepy, huh? Next, another crime tech call out with 2 techs responding to a violent event of some kind. On arrival, they pulled up to the house. A detective lieutenant came out waving his arms, telling them to stay in the truck. The lieutenant came up to the truck and said, "There's some weird, crazy stuff going on in that house, and you should stay out for your own good." So they left. I didn't hear this story until years later. That detective lieutenant must have really been rattled bad to advise the CSI team to leave and not to say anything to me about it. Yeah, that's the thing, because like you were over that department. So what kind of thing happened that it's like, don't even come in here? It's crazy, it's wild, and don't say a word about it. Yeah, that definitely sounds like paranormal, because remember, as CSI staff, they're used to seeing people in all kind of situations and doing the forensics on it. So if it was something that they couldn't help with, it sounds like the house needed an exorcism. Those are just my thoughts. Another gruesome CSI scene: murder of a family, mom and kids, and the father committed self-elimination. The crime techs were working on photographic documentation at the time. One tech went down to the basement while the other worked on the main level. The deceased father was on the main floor. He was lying supine on his back with his head looking straight up and arms at his sides. The tech needed a specific angle to photograph something. In order to get the best angle, she stood above his head with toes close to his shoulders. As she was snapping the photos, 2 hands grabbed both of her ankles and calves. It was like the dead man had rotated his arms to reach behind his head to grab the tech's legs, but the body never moved. Yes, she did let out a blood-curdling scream, which sent the other tech and on-scene officers to help. After that incident, the 2 techs decided to stay together, not knowing what other bizarre paranormal thing might happen in that house. Oh, absolutely. If some dead man grabs my ankles and calves, Yeah, somebody's staying with me. I am not going to be in that room alone. That's like ghostly assault. Is that what you would call it? I don't know. Definitely stay together in that case. Wow. A patrol officer on night shift was parked to work on a report. He was parked in one of the city's many parks. We had these huge interior dome lights, which worked great for blasting the interior with bright light, so you couldn't see outside your squad car. He heard a distinct knocking on his right front window. He took off, not knowing who or what it was outside his car in the dark. He did a quick U-turn and lit up the area with large spotlights. A search turned up nothing. Okay, so I see he was... Okay, because you would be. If you are parked and something is tapping on your window and it's dark and you can't see, like, your life as a police officer could be in danger at any time. So, yeah, he quickly moves, turns the car around, shines the lights, but sees nothing. But let's go on. So he went back to the same spot, which was under a tree. He convinced himself the noise was walnuts or branch pieces, but he really knew it was not tree parts. Some minutes later, the knocking returned, but this time it was on the driver's window a few inches from his car. That really shocked him, to say the least. Another search produced nothing. By this time, he was not making excuses. It was like a human hand and knuckles tapping the window. So he called a sergeant to his location, as the sarge had a Polaroid camera. Some Polaroids were taken, but they were very streaky. The streaks were like horizontal ribbons, which I've seen in some paranormal shows. Unfortunately, the Polaroids were infamous for having all kinds of artifacts in the images, with light-colored streaking being the most common. So the streaky Polaroids were useless as evidence. I totally believe the officer, as I'd known him for a long time, and he was a straight, solid former Marine who would not gin up a spook story and be made a laughingstock of patrol. But the officer did some archive searching and found out a woman had hanged herself from that very tree about 40 years before. Wow. So that's how much he believed in his own experience. I'm going to look in the archives and see what happened in this spot. So was that her tapping on his car window? Well, it certainly would seem someone wanted his attention. I think there were some more paranormal incidents, but these are the ones I most vividly recall. Cheers, Lieutenant Bill. Thank you so much for sharing those stories. Those were really scary. And can you imagine? I mean, yes, nurses, hospital personnel, paramedics, police officers, these kind of professions just kind of lead to some paranormal activity at times. Okay, I hope you enjoyed these stories. If you have a paranormal story, please comment below or email me. It's on my About page. It's avelincottage@gmail.com. I would love to hear your stories, especially if you are in one of these professions. But hey, a lot of people have some great true ghost stories. As for me and Scully, our argument isn't over. We're going to have a few ground rules here, because he is still breaking in on my editing. Yeah, y'all don't hear it, but I do. Have a great weekend. I will see you next time. Whatever you do, stay spooky. Bye-bye.